And my unloader said, hey man, why don't you take the truck and like run through the mud with it? So that this huge school building was there. And here's this 40-foot flatbed truck. It just only had the two rear wheels on each side in the back, but you know, massive engine, brand new. And we're gonna try to drift it through the mud. And you know, everything's fun while you're drifting that big sucker until you sink it up to the axles. And you know, I thought for sure my job was on the line at that point. What do you know about the Oort cloud? Several weeks ago, I think it was Forrest Valkai mentioned something about, you know, if we're going to go out in outer space and all this kind of stuff, we have to do this and we got to do that, and we'd have to make it through the Oort cloud. And I was like, wow, there, you know, didn't know there was an Oort cloud full of asteroids out there that we had to penetrate and get through. But do you know why there's an Oort cloud? And it's because there's a timing issue. You see, like asteroids, if they've been here too long, then they get larger. As you go backwards in time, they get larger. And that if they were larger, they wouldn't stay in their orbit. They would shoot out of our orbit. So there has to be this Oort cloud that sporadically and occasionally drops comets into, you know, rotating around us. The only problem is nobody's ever seen nor confirmed the Oort cloud. It's just kind of made up. But I was watching this video with Matt Dillahunty. He was debating with Dinesh D'Souza. And he made this snide remark. He's like, oh yeah, you can't like just pull an appeal of authority out of your pocket. You know, like you got God in your back pocket and just tell society how to operate. You know, that's kind of childish. And so at first glance, what Matt is talking about makes a little bit of sense. Like, so think about when you were very little and you're on your favorite swing and you're outside swinging away and you're just enjoying the afternoon, and your sibling runs up and says, Mama said it's time to get off the swing and come inside and do some chores. Well, at that point, you might want to apply some logic because, you know, your sibling could be deceptive. And maybe if you jump out of the swing and go inside to do your chores, maybe they steal your swing. So it does make sense to kind of logically think about things. And so, but here's the question. So if we're going to get rid of the appeal to authority, we're going to get rid of the appeal to God, then we've got an issue like, well, what do we judge things by? And there, a little bit later in the video, Matt was like, well, let's do it by logic and rationale. Let's go by logic. Let's measure things logic. And so the question is, whose logic? Are we talking about a supernatural, ethereal, behind the scenes, all-pervasive reality logic that everybody just kind of has to coincide with? And that kind of, you know, starts getting scary because that's kind of like getting close to objective truth and morality. So I'm sure that's not what Matt means. So maybe what he means is logic by consensus. Is that what he means? Is logic by consensus? No, it probably doesn't mean that either, because most are going to be for God existing. And so logically to them, it makes sense to include God in the equation. So maybe what Matt is referring to is a small elite group of intellectuals who have all together decided that logically there is no God. And the problem is that intellectuals are divided on this matter, and you've got some super brilliant people on planet Earth and throughout history that believe there is a God. And so we're kind of torn, like, is it my logic or your logic? Whose logic is best? But there's a different comparison, a different angle we can come from for this. And let's have a showdown between experience and logic, because this is basically what it's boiling down to, is that the atheists are like, let's measure everything by logic, and the Christians are like, well, let's measure by experience. Well, at least they're saying it is my experience that God exists. And so let's just take the raw essence of logic and experience and let them have a showdown, since we can't really have, since people have been having showdowns forever. So what about these two concepts pairing off against one another? And the number one advantage that Matt is going for the throat here, he's like like a dog with big fangs trying to get at the throat of his opponent. He's like, let's go right to the essence here. Logic can root out a bad or false experience. Logic, if experience and logic are facing off, logic gets a point there because logic can root out a bad and false experience. So if somebody's lying about God, like, let's help them out, or let's figure this out. Or if somebody's having a bad experience, okay, let's just jump forward. So, but the question is how often are we having wrong experiences? Considering that experience is something that we have all the time, and we have multitudes of them to just rely upon, we do come across the times in our life, the rare and special occasions that we're wrong about something. Like maybe I thought that girl liked me, but she really didn't. And so at times, at unique and rare moments, you can be really having a bad experience perception of something, and logic would have been better for you. And I'd say some people are better or worse at this, but the majority of the time, the experiences you are having are solid and accurate and amazing, but logic, on the rare occasion, can help point out a bad experience or a faulty experience. So logic gets a point there, except that when you consider that most of the time, experience is truthful and logic doesn't really reinforce that, or logic can reinforce that, but logic doesn't have to bolster it. It's just supported on its own. Then you're using experience a whole lot more than logic. So it seems like logic is going to be the weightier of the two then. The other problem that I'm seeing, or the comparison I'm seeing, is you can have an experience without having any logic. I know. You can have experience without having logic. People have lots of experiences without having logic. And there's times we absolutely need logic in our experiences. But you cannot have logic without experiences. So technically then what that means is that logic is dependent upon experience, which would make it a tier down, which would make it inferior. So, which is more powerful? The one we use the most, or the one we use occasionally? The one that can be independent, or the one that is dependent? Further, you remember how I said that logic can help prove an experience wrong? Well, experience can also prove that a person's logic is wrong. So that point that I originally gave logic, I'm not going to erase that and give it, I'll just leave that neutral, because they both can correct each other. But here is a point that I don't even understand why atheists don't get this, is that experience proves experience. So like if I have an experience and I want to help prove that it's a good and valid and legitimate experience, I just need to have another experience like it. And then another experience, and another experience. And in fact, this is what science is based on. Have you noticed that science isn't technically based on man's logic, any one man's logic, or any total group logic, because experience can prove the logic wrong. So even science itself rests more on experience than on logic. This battle is not looking fair, guys. The battle is not looking fair. Further, if you haven't had the experience of another person, can you really speak to that experience? Now, they can share it with you, and whether they're lying or not, that's a whole different matter, but they can share it with you. But if you haven't had it yourself, then how can you speak to that experience? But there's a whole lot of people out there that think that they can validate or invalidate another person's experience, but aren't those faith-based assumptions to assume that I have had the experience you've had, or I know that the experience that you're having can't be real or legitimate? Aren't those faith based conclusions, not really grounded in anything. So another angle is logic is powerful enough to tear down a bad or broken thought. Okay, logic gets a point, yes. So, but logic isn't strong enough to tear down an experience. Yeah, so like if somebody has a really bad thought, they're like, I want to go take my whole entire paycheck and buy all lottery tickets and I'm going to win the lottery this time. You can logically say, hey, that's a really bad idea. But if somebody found experientially that driving endlessly without stopping for gas was always ended up in a bad place, I don't care how much logic someone could try to talk them out of that, or you can use a different scenario, but logic won't tear down a real experience, and it can't tear down a real experience. So the retort to that would be, well, in certain situations, a delusion could be co-equal with experience, right? Or somebody could be having an experience they think is true, but it's actually delusional in some sense. And in that case, it's really interesting to me. Do you know how few times that logic actually tears down a delusion? I mean, try to counsel people on their love lives. Try to counsel people against their chosen favorites. Like, no, that's not the best. This is the best. Go ahead and try. And logic there seems to be pitiful in convincing people of delusions that their delusion is wrong. I remember years ago someone telling me they could tell the difference between Coke and Pepsi, and logically I tried to explain to them, no, you can't, no, you can't, no, you can't. But guess what did tear down the illusion, or the illusion and the delusion? Experience. So experience is then on equal footing again and overall superior to logic. That person tasted blindfolded Coke and Pepsi, then they found, I can't tell the difference. And they were as confused as anyone else. I'm not saying nobody can do that. I'm saying that this person's delusion was pulled down. And so if logic isn't powerful enough even hardly to tear down delusions, why are people leaning so heavily upon it? Now, while we're in this category and in this arena, what about the statement that people are, they get so emotionally worked up that they believe in something that just isn't there? Okay, possibly, yeah, okay, I see the point there. But then a question is, could someone possibly be so emotionally down that they're killing apparatus in them to actually help them to process information? You see, we don't even fully know how the human being mind works. We're trying to map it. We've got some ideas, but it is nowhere near static, or you cannot draw diagrams. You cannot pinpoint exactly how this is firing and that's firing and this is working. We have no idea. And so the question is, if somebody can get so emotionally worked up to believe in nonsense, could they get so emotionally down that they would believe in nonsense as well? Like, could they suppress their emotions so far that they suppress their intuition so far down that they miss experiences that would prove otherwise to them? So, in summary, just kind of backing all this up, Matt says, let's just take this appeal of authority and throw it out. So then if you're going to throw it out, then what are you going to use? Whose authority are you going to use? Whose logic are you going to use? And if it boils down to logic versus experience, experience hands down is a better way of knowing.